this is why I have so much fun reading these kinds of stories. So hit us up because like we love those ideas. And also if if Riot is listening to this, if you do want to steal that for an expansion, all that I ask is that I get to be an NPC that gets eaten by Evelyn. All right, that's all I'm asking. All right. All right. I want to see Evelyn eat Hetch. All right.
I want on the record that Necrit is not only in a game, he's in the book as a major character, and Hetch only wants to be eaten by Evelyn as an NPC.
I don't even need voice lines, man. Like,
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 94. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hetch.
what's going on, everybody? I'm ready to keep talking about some mommies I want to step on me.
Don't ruin this one as well. If you listened to our last Evelyn episode, I'm sorry for Hetch's behavior.
I'm not. I'm done apologizing. This is who I am. It's not a stage, Mom. It's not a phase.
You can listen to us everywhere. You can reach us at podcastcore@gmail.com. You can visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info, and then follow us on any platform or all the platforms. That would help us with discoverability. And then leave a like, comment, short review. The easiest way, the reason we are where we're at, is because of word of mouth. So tell a friend to fear happiness by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Oh yeah. Just embrace the fear. You don't have to fear happiness if you embrace the fear. What if the fear makes me happy? Have you considered that, Ryan?
So we're continuing. I'm just going to start ignoring him if you listeners don't mind.
It's like, wait, why am I muted?
So today we're talking about her story, The Tallest Daisy, where we get to follow Evelynn on a hunt. And it's going to expand on everything we told you, because that original episode, like we mentioned, is more of like an encyclopedia entry rather than the standard bio, where we get a little more meat on the bones. So we know what Evelynn is. So let's see her in action. And this story starts off with Evelynn in her demon wisp, we're going to call it that, form, kind of moving through the shadows of this town, looking for her dinner for the night. And it's a festive night in this town, so there's many people, running around, drinking, talking, laughing, they're feasting and partying. It's a good old time. But this is causing an issue for Evelynn, more so because she hasn't fed in a very long time, and she needs a satisfying meal to make up for that lost time. She's essentially starving at this point, which is a reference to our title for our previous episode.
Right. And as far as like with this starvation, part of the reason that a festival is bad, because if you think of it just off of the primal sense of a hunter finding prey, there's plenty of prey with a bunch of drunks. But for Evelynn, it's about having people at their highest highs being brought down to the lowest lows. So this is a bad time for her, because if you have a lot of mind-altering substances in your body, you don't really have any control over your emotions. So
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I don't need you addled. I want you feeling all of it. I need you to be in pain. I want the pain.
Her definition of quality control is different.
Very different. I don't know if the FDA would approve.
So, she comes across her first prospect, which is a drunk man, and he's laying in the gutter and he's still holding the damn bottle of wine. But he's passed out cold, and she's desperate, right? So she's thinking about it. She's like, okay, if I can just get his attention, I can make this work. And that's until a damn roach crawls across his face and he doesn't flinch or move, and she's as disgusted as we would be. And that's when we learn the part about her feeding process, where she's kind of refined her palate over time, and her victims need to be aware. And due to him being extremely drunk, he's not going to be able to have the senses that she needs to feed on. So the effort she would put into, waking him up, getting him out of town, getting him all riled up is a lot more than the substance or sustenance she's going to get from feeding on him. It becomes like a light snack that she's working overtime to make, right?
Right, and also, like, you're not gonna eat in an establishment if you see roaches all around it. Like, look, there's only one establishment in the US that gets that pass, and that's Waffle House.
Yeah, I was just about to say it.
Like, and Evelyn's looking at it going, "Do I want Waffle House today?" And she decides no, so we move on to our next victim.
And as many wise people in Atlanta say, you don't go to Waffle House, you end up there.
So true.
So this takes us to the concept of the title, which is, the tallest daisy. Or sorry, not the tallest daisy. We're not there yet. But she continues to search first. So she's like, okay, this guy doesn't work. The next prospect she comes across is this plump woman stumbling out of a tavern, which is a great scene, right? Listen, we don't, there's no genderizing here. Women too can have a good time partying. And she comes out just drunk off her ass, still eating a turkey leg and just scarfing it down. And I love how Evelyn's her analysis of this person, because all these people, like, she's not human, remember this, okay? She's a demon. So she's looking at this food, which is the woman to her, and she's like, I can compromise once again, right? She's thinking about it again. There's no roach, but then she decides that this woman has a self-destructive nature, and this will affect the feeding process. So, according to her, she's like, this will ruin the meal because she's already destroying herself. Me destroying her is going to do nothing.
Like Evelyn's look, like just gazing into this person, like and just kind of breaking down the pros and cons of treating this woman as her meal.
Yeah.
Like it, I would love to have that woman as a card in Runeterra. Like she could be like a Bilgewater character with like a bottle of rum in one hand and the turkey leg in the other. It would like have like tough or something
Yeah.
like to represent like just like the resistances
She
to
creates a token that is a turkey leg.
Oh god, it's like you could have like the next character that you play like fights the turkey leg and gains its stats. You're welcome, Riot.
So after this, she kind of goes into like an internal monologue where she thinks about, or we get more of an insight into her thought process, where she thinks about these people like flowers, right? And her goal is not to pluck, she wants to pluck the flower, and that's where she gets the exhalation. But she doesn't want to pluck a rotted, dying daisy. She wants the tallest daisy, the one that's fresh from bloom, that's at the peak, at its high, so that she can pluck it from the ground, killing it. And that's where she gets her pleasure. So that's where we get the analogy. So during this kind of internal monologue, she's starting to come to the realization that she thinks she fucked up as a predator and chose a terrible hunting ground. Right? She's not in the right element to get the result she wants. She's trying to force it, right? And at this point, she thinks she's an expert in what she does. And the cards that we've referenced consider that. There's other lesser demons now that kind of report to her. So it's like a shot at her as far as being at an intermediate level to be falling prey to such a shitty situation because she's starving. And then her luck turns around completely 180 as this gentlemanly man walks out of a high-end bar and he's sober. He's sober, he's happy, he's fucking carrying a bouquet of flowers. And he's humming a jaunty tune. And all I can think in my mind is like, run, you fool, run.
This like the moment that like Evelyn starts to describe like seeing this man and how like excited that she is, the more that it's like a really bad and super campy horror film of just like they
Exactly.
introduce this character to you and it's like you know 10 seconds into the character hitting the screen, this dude's dead. Like, that is like I've just summed up like 2 paragraphs for everyone. Like, that's the description of this guy. He's gonna die.
Yeah, and this is the most feral we've seen Evelyn, like even in our last episode, because her lashers, which you're familiar with from the game, they redesigned them. But it's these two lashers that come out of her back. They're even responding to all the stimuli, right? They're like flickering in the wind, almost like a viper tasting the wind while a prey is close, right?
Right.
That kind of response as a predator would have. So she's like, I'm going to follow him to the point where she says he's walking for like an hour and she's just following him, making sure not to lose him because this is her only savior for this night. And she needs this meal at this point. So she follows him home where he's greeted by his wife and his two young children. And this is where it gets real. Because we're just in this town with, it's a party night, everyone's getting drunk, whatever. Yeah, she's hunting people, but it's the city. It happens all the time. But now we're out in the countryside, nice manner. This guy has a family. It's a domestic situation. And lo and behold, this just gets her hotter because this now fits her interest because based on her previous experience, she knows what's deep down inside this man, exactly what he's looking for. And that's a deviation from the mundane.
Exactly. And I mean, and this is like combined with the fact of how hungry she is, it's like hunger is the best spice. But this isn't so much of like, hey, I found a pack of ramen. It was like, man, I am about to die. I had a pack of ramen set off to the side, and then somebody just came in the door with like gourmet Michelin star ramen, and it's
Yeah,
just like, yes, yes. But it like the depiction of her lashers just kind of being out there is like the perfect defining point of how hungry she is because Evelyn's a stealth character.
yeah,
She takes on human form so she could eat. And she's so hungry she can't maintain her human form.
yeah.
So it's like no, she going through it. She going through it, and this man is finally the thing that she needs to stop being in it.
Yeah, and she's come this far, so she not only follows him this distance, and then she waits for a long time. She waits until the whole family goes to sleep except him. He's in his parlor room, and he has a candle in the window, and he's kind of reading, chilling, smoking his pipe as you do. And she decides now's the time to pounce. So she walks up slowly to the parlor window, and as she's approaching, she's taking on the form. 'Cause remember, this whole time she's in between her demon and wisp form, as Hetch mentioned. So now she's in the form we know her for. And the man, he's not gonna not notice. It's the middle of the night and his family's asleep and he's chilling. He's like, oh shit. So she gets his attention and this is another reference back to lore. Um, Legends of Runeterra, the card game, and League of Legends, is she basically uses a lure and pulls him towards the window, and he responds exactly as expected. And the moment, and this is something we kind of left out of the last episode on purpose, one big factor is Evelynn likes to get whoever she's hunting to at least touch her. And this is something that happens in a lot of fantasy that deals with succubus or succubus style characteristics of archetype is that once you touch the creature, it's over. And that's what happens here is he touches her, she then puts her hand on his, and from that point forward, he's certain it's a done deal, right? She knows she's going to eat tonight. She's going to eat good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you can have like as many differences as you want into all these kinds of different like fantasy characters or archetypes. But there's some rules that stay the same, which is, a vampire, you don't let them in your house. Werewolves, you let them hold the silverware.
Yeah.
All right. Succubus, you don't touch them. You don't touch
No
them.
touch. No touchy.
You don't touch them. And so then we get the depiction here of like, hey, homie touched her. And so then it's just like, all right, what's gonna happen here. It's game over. You type out GG, go next. Evelynn got fed.
Even to the point where if you look at the art that we referenced in Evelynn's card in our last episode, the Lunari priestess touches her and she puts her hand on the Lunari priestess, and then the following quote is what happens after that point. So, like, listen, they know what they're doing. Riot's crushing it as always.
Yeah, yeah, like, they have the content, it's here, and they do a good job with it, and that speaking of doing a good job with it, yeah, the dude touched her. We all know what's gonna happen to him, but are we done with this story yet? Not quite.
Exactly. We hear shuffling, and in comes his wife as this is popping off, and she's checking to see if everything's all right because it's super late. And to this, Evelyn has a reaction I did not expect. She says it only sweetens the deal. And the final line, this is pretty great because it kind of leaves it open to interpretation. Um, she asked, "Is everything okay, love?" asked the man's wife. "Everything's going to be wonderful, my darling," the demon answered for the dumbstruck man. Now, one thing I want to know is, did she say it in his voice? Because that would be creepy. Or did she say it in her own voice? And it's followed by, "The deal had become even sweeter and the prospects more enticing. There was one daisy in full flower to pluck and one bulb to bloom while it watched." That is a great way to end a fucking Evelyn story because it
Like,
makes you
it's
think
so
is
good.
like, is the woman going to like can Evelyn also allure people who are watching her feed? Or you would expect it to cause fear, right? Like the woman would run away, scream, and grab her kids and leave while Evelyn's feeding. But the way she explains it is as if in the past this has happened before, where you have like a threesome kind of experience, quote unquote.
I mean, like, especially if, like, if there's a way to where, like, Evelyn can either restrain the wife or, like, possibly, like, have, afflicted the wife with a lure as well to where the wife can't get away.
Yeah.
Like, if the wife is, like, stuck there, it makes sense that this is perfect for Evelyn because, it's a 2-for-1 deal all of a sudden.
Yeah.
She went on this hunt, found the dude, and it's like, "Finally, I get to eat." And then it's like, what kind of pain and suffering is more than watching someone you love
Yeah.
go through pain and suffering?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, while I'm eating, I will be making my next meal. Like it's like that's something else, man. If just
This
like I like, especially when I'm cooking for myself, I love that the idea of like, hey, I think I have enough here for 2 portions. So then, like, I'm making it's like I'm making my dinner and then I split half of it into like a little to-go box. There's lunch for tomorrow. I don't have to worry about crap. I'm just gonna heat that sucker up and I'm eating good for 2
it's
days.
it's
That's a great
funny
feeling.
that that's your interpretation because my interpretation was as a child, we used to like after my mom would cook, we would eat dinner while watching the food channel. And that was my interpretation of this. So I listen, all in all it says is that Hetch and I are the same person.
This is why we need each other for the show.
So that's where the story leaves off. And we wanted, we kind of want to do a quick touch on something we'll talk about in the future when we start to get more away from just, bios and stories and closer to when like the MMO comes out is the concept of an Evelyn character versus an Ari versus an Elise, right? It's crazy that, I mean, not crazy, but it's interesting that League has these three characters, which essentially are based off that same kind of archetype of the succubus style, right? And a concept that comes up when you read all these stories, and we have episodes for these, so you don't even have to read them. You can go listen to those episodes; they're great. But when you go through those episodes, there's this concept of emptiness. Regardless of where these characters start, their origin, and how they end up in the process of feeding constantly, one theme that constantly is referenced is that if they don't do what they're doing, they feel empty. And their quest and what they choose to do is always to fill that emptiness, which is a very human thing. And in my opinion, that's what's the connective tissue that makes these characters, intriguing to us. Is like they're not humans, but there are elements that you can relate to in that, yes, they cause toxic behavior if approached wrong, but the cause is something everyone can relate to, right?
I mean, like, specifically in the case of, Evelyn here, you say approached wrong,
Hetch, you're
and
different. You're broken. No,
toxic.
wait.
and
Oh, no.
I don't understand why you have to word it that way. But no, I and s on a serious note,
Yeah,
I don't view, like, the as far as, like, the idea of, like, feeling that emptiness and trying to fill the void there,
yeah.
I don't view that as being human. I view it as being animalistic.
Mm.
Like, they're
Humans are
following.
animals.
Yeah, humans are animals.
Mhm,
So, but like, human nature is like this sense of empathy
mhm.
and, complex emotions, which most other animals don't exhibit that. Like, the more that we're learning about animals, the more that we can connect other animals to some of those things. But it's kind of hard to pinpoint, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is stuff that we are still learning because humans are constantly learning. Um, Whereas, like the need to eat, like, because especially in the case of Ari and Evelyn and Elise, with all three of them,
Yeah.
like this is consumption for them. Like, sure, with Evelyn, it's feeding off of pain, Ari's human emotion, and Elise just flat out eats people.
Yeah.
Like, but it's still sustenance. They, in like animal nature is, get sustenance, get rest, and reproduce. Like,
Mhm.
the it's like those are the 3 basic things, cover them, and that's life. Uh, so that's more of, like, how I view that void, and as far as with these characters in this world, I don't view the way that they've become this way as a connection to humans. I view it more as a connection to something bigger,
Mhm.
and so I view it more as a connection to something like the void. The void is this entity that is bleeding into Runeterra,
Yeah.
and it has one goal, which is total consumption of life, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
it. And then it, like, there's always like these questions of, like, sure, it's a magical realm, it's a made up story, yada yada yada. But, like, if we're trying to think of, like, how do characters like Evelyn get there? Like, what is this perfect storm of these magic energies that kind of create a demon? And, the demon is there to consume on pain and everything. The void is a great connection to that. Like, what if the void is the way that, like, that energy even existed? So then it's like, yeah, the pain and suffering is what triggered Evelyn into existence, but her basic need is consumption, and that comes from the void.
Yeah.
And that could be the same with, like, Ari. Well, I mean, Ari, like, since Ari, like, has more empathy towards humans because she consumes all of emotion, like, it's a little bit more ambiguous. But with Elise, I mean, that definitely fits that profile.
Yeah.
Elise just wants to eat. Like,
So
Alicia is
that
hungry.
and that's that I like that approach as well, because I think it gets to the point where the part that becomes intriguing, because as we've mentioned before, these archetypes have existed forever in fantasy, right? They're just putting their own spin on it. They're not reinventing the wheel. So what's the furthest part that you can get from that? Because for example, we've mentioned vampires before. We have Vladimir. And we know in most lores, vampires have to feed on blood. And vampires have lived for a long period, or they usually live for long periods of time. And all three of these characters fit that, where like they're essentially immortal, quote unquote. But for Elise, right, what says she has to feed on people besides the concept of morality? Like, what if she chose to feed on animals? For Ari, when she chooses in her story, because we actually get a depiction of her changing her appetite, it's like she wants to stop feeding on other people's emotions, start creating her own. So, is there a limiter for then a character like Evelyn, even though she's born of pain and suffering and she's done it for millennia? Can she change her appetite? And that gives you the okay, regardless of where you're coming from, as far as the philosophy of them, where can it go? And that's where the interesting part is to me is like, okay, there's obviously room for them to change, even though they're not human, because they're interacting with humans or different creatures. Because we have demigods, we have gods, we have celestial, we have all that. So, is there a place they can go where you start to have quote unquote character growth in a unique manner?
Right, and that's why, like, I would be more interested to see if we can get, kind of more pieces that fit into a puzzle. I don't want like all the pieces because like having these ambiguous
Yeah,
questions is fun. Like these are the kind of fun topics that it exists in all
midichlorians.
fantasy stories. Yeah, shut up.
Never forget.
Never forget, but it's like like these discussions are fun because it's like with that it's like if they are connected to the void, then it's like no, they can't change because they will always feel that need to consume. uh but like but then like, if there's not that connection, like Elise could definitely change because she is just consuming biomass, like
Yep.
so anything that's living and breathing is biomass, so she could change up her appetite. But we know that Elise, chose humans because for her it was all a political game in the
Yep.
start. So then it's like, oh well, if I've got this curse on me, might as well take out my enemies.
That's,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. Like I I think like that idea of changing is like Ari is definitely like the most obvious pick for
Yeah.
that because like we cover that in one of her stories of like she's actively trying to pursue this concept of change. And so it's more like, does she actually want to change? Like we know that she wants to create her own emotions and her own memories and figure out who she is. But once if she discovers who she is, does that mean that she's going to want to change from eating emotions? Because it's even described that she's kind of high, like she's kind of hooked. So is she going to change? Who knows? Like,
Question mark. Yeah.
yeah, that'd be the more fun one. I don't think Evelyn's going to change. It's like, pain and suffering. Like you need to have a more human element to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't get to see too much of like animal like the rest of animal life experiencing like emotional suffering. Like they experience plenty of physical suffering,
Yeah.
but we don't see the emotional side much. So, but I would be fun to see if like Evelyn gets involved in like like what if Evelyn gets involved in like on the sidelines of a fight with like the Sentinels of Light, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like the Sentinels, like Lucian screaming for Senna and like all that pain and destruction, and then experiencing the pain that is Viego mourning his lost love, who, flat out killed him
Yeah.
because he's a psychopath. And then it's like this spirit, like the power of a spirit that is basically controlling the entire realm of the dead, feel that kind of pain and suffering. What if that is enough for everyone to be like, I want more of that?
Yeah.
The humans don't cut it anymore. I want more of that. Like that would be a fun storyline of Evelyn trying to like feed off of the like spirits who can't move on.
Yeah. And this is essentially, to, wrap it up. This is essentially what we hope Riot is doing when they're building the MMO, right? Because we just essentially built an expansion for them. But it would be cool
Yep.
to have a space where you have these three characters who are different versions of this archetype meet up in some manner, and they go through these philosophical things, and you as a player get to join them on that journey or try to interfere with that journey. But we wanted to start doing these kind of stuff at the end of some of these story episodes where we have more time, and in the future, hopefully their own self-contained episodes. So what do you think about all that? Because that was a lot. We know that was a lot on top of the story. But if you have any input, that would be cool to hear. And
Yeah.
like what
At
you
pod,
expect out of
yeah.
the MMO experience.
Right. And that's podcastcore@gmail.com. Like I said, these are the discussions that are fun to me. Like this is why I have so much fun reading these kinds of stories. So hit us up because like we love those ideas. And also if Riot is listening to this, if you do want to steal that for an expansion, all that I ask is that I get to be an NPC that gets eaten by Evelyn. All right, that's all I'm asking. All right. I want to see Evelyn eat Hetch.
I want on the record that Necrit is not only in a game, he's in the book as a major character, and Hetch only wants to be eaten by Evelyn as an NPC.
I don't even need voice lines, man. Like,
Just one
Just
voice
let
line
me-
of you screaming.
Yeah, just let me have this.
And with that, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Hey, take care, everybody.